If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
There's seating near the front. The concert begins at 5. It'll be Mozart, Elvis, and one of your choosing. Or just a nice, if heaven exists, to know that there's laughter. That would be a great thing.
Oh, yeah.
Just to hear God goes, 2 Jews walk into a bar.
Oh, he made people laugh, didn't he? He was very public, though, about his own personal battles. It was no secret that he fought depression for some time, made more than a few trips to rehab for drug treatment. But as we all struggle to make sense of this terrible tragedy, a lot of people are wondering, how could the man who constantly made people laugh and smile be struggling with such deep and dark depression that it then ultimately caused him to take his own life? CNN chief medical correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta joins me from Atlanta. And Sanjay, I was talking to a suicide researcher at the top of last hour from up here at Columbia, and he was saying to me, Brooke, you know, a lot of people are depressed, but it's a very select group who decides to finally take his or her life. What is that trigger? Why would someone do that?
I think that's such an important message, you know, because people do hear stories like this and they think it becomes almost preordained if someone has significant depression that it's going to have some tragic sort of tale like this. But, you know, a couple things. First of all, nothing I think ever can fully explain it. So let me just preface by saying that. And I think searching for a complete explanation, I think, is a fruitless sort of task. But keep in mind, you know, we're talking about a brain disease here. This isn't something that's anecdotal. This is something that can be measured now in the brain like it never could be before. So we know that there is changes that happen in someone who has depression. Compound that with the fact that he had heart surgery recently, that he had a genetic predisposition to this because of family history. He had addiction. All those sort of contribute to it. But to your question, you know, a combination at the time of helplessness, of hopelessness, of no light at the end of the tunnel, no feeling of power, and an accumulation of several things. It's not usually some discrete thing that all of a sudden just pushes somebody over. It's an accumulation of a bunch of things with no sense that you can control it anymore. And that's the sad reality of it. It just becomes overwhelming.
So we spent the entire last hour really talking about Robin Williams, but also raising awareness for suicide prevention and depression, and I'm overwhelmed, quite honestly, by all of the tweets that I've been getting from people who feel so open because of this to talk about how they've been feeling. And for those people, Sanjay, what advice do you have? Because treatment is there. There are people you can call, but I can't imagine being in the thick of it and thinking there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
We are better than ever at treating, you know, depression. I mean, it's a difficult disease, but it is a disease of the brain. And, you know, I think that's an important first step. When you start to substitute the word depression or mental illness in general with diabetes, with cancer, with heart disease, you think about it completely differently. And you feel almost like, you know, look, we can control this, we can do things to be proactive and treat this. We haven't gotten there yet with so much of mental illness, and I think it feels...
Well, there's been such a stigma.
The stigma, you know, I think in large part prevents obviously patients from getting some of the treatment that they need. And, you know, we've gotten better at this just over the last couple of decades. So the stigma, the stories that we hear from last generation, they are different stories nowadays because of some of that progress. But there's also this other part of it, Brooke, which I heard you talking about a little bit as well, and this interplay between this pure genius, this comic, and all that he was able to do and all that he was able to come up with immediately spur of the moment, and things like depression, the other forms of mental illness. You hear people talk about the idea that there is this interplay there. People who have mental illness may be more likely to have certain creative genius as well, and vice versa. I mean, these two things could go back and forth. I read an article saying, you know, people who are comic geniuses, they make these connections in the brain that other people wouldn't see. You hear Robin Williams, where did he come up with that? Where did that come from? But sometimes those connections don't exist in real life, and that can be quite jarring for them and even contribute to some of the mental illness. So there could be a real interface there.
Sanjay Gupta, thank you. And that brings me to my next guest, because the owner of the iconic Laugh Factory Comedy Club in LA, he says 80% of comedians come from some form of tragedy. He wants to help them deal with it. So he has actually set up this sofa, and 2 nights a week, comics meet with psychologists, with therapists in the comedy club. We'll talk to him about where he got the idea, how comics are reacting to this. Coming up, you're watching CNN.